Let's go!
Tom Brady recently turned 42 years old. It's not hidden the fact that he was overlooked during the 2000 NFL Draft, mostly untalked about throughout the process. Nowadays, we know all about Tom Brady and what he's accomplished, but as far as the #1 overall pick from the same draft, most people don't even remember who he was. So, we are going to look at the #1 pick from the year that Tom Brady was drafted, along with the rest of the #1 picks throughout the 2000s, and see how their careers turned out. With that, I'm going to rank these guys on a tier list that I made, separated into 6 tiers. I'll be using the top 2 picks from the 1998 NFL Draft as a reference, Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf. At the top of this list, we have the Manning tier. Peyton Manning embodies what everyone wants in a #1 overall pick, a storied NFL career claiming 5 MVPs, a bunch of NFL records, and multiple Super Bowls. Then after that, in descending order, we have possible Hall of Fame, pretty good, average, disappointing, and lastly, the Leaf tier. Ryan Leaf was a player that scouts argued could have gone #1 overall before Peyton Manning. After being selected second in the '98 draft, Leaf's career couldn't have gone any worse. He barely lasted 3 seasons, becoming one of the biggest draft busts of all time. The disappointing tier is when a player just can't get their career going, or is riddled with injuries. But the Leaf tier? That's when a player is so bad or shows such a lack of professionalism that it becomes worse than simply not playing well. It becomes an all-out tragedy.
Don't talk to me, alright? Knock it off!
So, let's begin. In 2000, the Cleveland Browns were trying to piece together their newly formed expansion franchise. After taking quarterback Tim Couch the year prior, it was time for an edge rusher, and Penn State's Courtney Brown fit the mold. The 6'4", 271-pound defensive end dominated in college, ran a 4.52 40, and had a 37-inch vertical jump. Taking him #1 seemed like a no-brainer. Although his rookie season was slightly underwhelming, he began to show promise in year 2, achieving 4.5 sacks in just 5 games. But the year eventually ended in knee surgery. Unfortunately, this would be foreshadowing for the rest of his career. After 3 more seasons of injuries and a lack of production on the field, the Browns let him go. He would spend 1 year with the Broncos before being cut prior to the 2007 season after failing to pass a physical, thus marking the end of his playing days. For how his NFL career turned out, he belongs in the disappointing tier.
With the first selection in the 2001 NFL Draft, the Atlanta Falcons select Michael Vick, quarterback, Virginia Tech.
Throughout the early 2000s, Michael Vick was must-watch TV. He elevated the Falcons with 2 playoff runs in his first 3 seasons as the full-time starting quarterback. The high point of his Falcons career came during the playoffs in 2003, when he went head-to-head against Brett Favre in Lambeau and beat him soundly.
He has a lot of the same tools that Steve Young had, including this.
Yep, what they call the old escapability to the 28-yard line.
Following the dogfighting scandal and 2-year suspension, Vick would make a return and surprise many. He was the comeback player of the year in 2010, putting up the most efficient passing stats of his career and led the Eagles to the playoffs. Overall, Vick's skill set was very special. He is the all-time leading rusher among quarterbacks, and along with that, he made a few postseason runs and lit up the league for multiple seasons. He should be high on this list, but due to him missing time for prison and constantly being unable to play due to injuries, he belongs in the pretty good tier.
In the 2002 NFL Draft, the Houston Texans select David Carr.
Like Tim Couch a few years earlier, David Carr was going to be the first selection to a brand new expansion franchise. Expansion franchises normally struggle for a few seasons when they get started. The Texans were no exception. David Carr would start day 1. The most notable stat from his rookie year was that he got sacked a whopping 76 times. The fact that he survived all 16 games and didn't get hurt is quite an accomplishment among itself, but getting sacked nearly 5 times a game is going to take a toll, whether that's physically or mentally. Carr would start for 5 seasons with the Texans, leading them to a measly record of 22-53 and threw more interceptions than touchdowns. 3 of those seasons, he was sacked more than any other quarterback in the league. Carr would make a brief appearance in Carolina before finding himself as the backup in New York until he retired in 2012. He belongs in the disappointing tier. This isn't necessarily all his fault. The Texans also play a major role in the failure of his career.
The first choice in the 2003 draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select Carson Palmer.
How Carson Palmer's career began had given Cincinnati hope. In his second season as the starter, the Bengals went 11-5, where he put up some really impressive numbers and made the Pro Bowl. But in the playoffs, Palmer would suffer a brutal knee injury, in what many Bengals fans feel was the difference in that game. Although Palmer's career stats in Cincinnati are pretty solid, how he left would leave a bitter taste in the mouths of Bengals fans.
Some drama unfolding with the Bengals. WCPO-TV in Cincinnati is reporting a source close to Carson Palmer says the quarterback claims he'll never step foot in Paul Brown Stadium again.
In an interview done by NFL Films producer Steve Trout, Palmer had grown increasingly frustrated with the organization over the years, saying they disrespected his backup John Kidna, how they needed to get an actual general manager, and the organization as a whole needed to modernize. Things got very heated between Palmer and owner Mike Brown. And on a Reddit thread titled, "What Happened Between Carson Palmer and the Bengals?" apparently, quote, after a loss, some Bengals fans went to Palmer's house and dumped a bunch of trash on his lawn. He wasn't home yet, just his wife and 2 toddlers. She was pretty freaked out. The rumor at the time was that Palmer's wife told them that she was leaving Cincinnati for good. He could either join her or get divorced. To clarify, this is just a rumor. Not sure if it's fully true, but it is interesting nonetheless. Years later, after a short, disappointing stint with the Raiders, at the age of 36, Palmer would put up the best season of his career, 4,600 yards, 35 passing touchdowns, and led the Cardinals to a record of 13-3. They got pummeled in the NFC Championship, but Palmer definitely left his mark on the franchise that season. For relatively consistent play over the course of 14 years, and a couple of really outstanding seasons, he belongs in the pretty good tier.
Manning lobs it, Burris alone, touchdown!
Manning throwing, and it's intercepted.
It's fascinating how much hate Eli Manning gets. He's definitely had some head-scratching moments, and his play has regressed over the last few years, but looking at what he's accomplished, he is outstanding in the playoffs statistically. Not to mention the fact that his career passing numbers rank 7th all-time. Plus, he doesn't get hurt. He has been an Iron Man over the course of 14 years, playing in all but one game. And it doesn't even make sense why he didn't play in that one game. He definitely belongs in the possible Hall of Fame tier. Eli has gotten it done on the biggest stage. Twice. There's only a handful of quarterbacks who can say the same.
The first selection in the 2005 NFL Draft, the San Francisco 49ers select Alex Smith, quarterback, Utah.
Alex Smith's career can be described in one word: overshadowed. Although he went number 1 in 2005, the first round became about Aaron Rodgers. After dealing with years of dysfunction and struggle in San Francisco, Smith finally led the Niners to a hot start in 2011, just barely missing a chance to play in the Super Bowl. And keeping the momentum going in 2012, Smith would again play well, only to get hurt halfway through the season, and then it all became about this guy. Then, he was shipped out of San Francisco in favor of Colin Kaepernick. Smith would join Andy Reid in Kansas City, where he would consistently lead them to the playoffs for years. After 3 Pro Bowl appearances in 5 seasons, the Chiefs would move on to a new guy who you may have heard of.
The Kansas City Chiefs select Patrick Mahomes, the second.
That's when he ended up in Washington last season, and it ended with a horrific leg injury. Alex Smith is expected to miss this upcoming season due to an infection from leg surgery. He's been a true professional his entire career, even though he's gotten the short end of the stick many times. Still, he belongs in the pretty good tier.
The first selection in the 2006 NFL Draft, the Houston Texans select Mario Williams, defensive end, North Carolina State.
Mario Williams is also an overshadowed number 1 pick. With Reggie Bush and Vince Young receiving all the hype in the 2006 draft, Mario quietly would have the best career of the three. He became a perennial double-digit sack guy by year 2 in Houston. Then, when he went to Buffalo, he put up consistently solid numbers, including All-Pro status in 2014. His career sort of took a nosedive after that, but he did play 7 full seasons without getting hurt and reached 4 Pro Bowls in 11 years. He belongs in the pretty good tier.
With the first pick in the 2007 NFL Draft, the Oakland Raiders select quarterback JaMarcus Russell, LSU.
JaMarcus Russell may be the most infamous #1 overall pick ever. Coming out of LSU, he possessed an unbelievable skill set. As a quarterback, he stood at a massive 6'6", 260 pounds. He could throw a football 70 yards on his knees. What was not to like? The dude was a Madden creation come to life. However, the superhero-like appeal that JaMarcus Russell had would die quickly. It became shockingly obvious within the locker room right away.
The story as it was told to me was Coach DiFilippo said, look, JaMarcus, we've got about 15, 20 plays that we want for this week. Here's a DVD for you. Tonight, I want you to watch these, okay? So JaMarcus is like, cool, he takes the DVD. So the next day they come to practice, come to the facility, say, hey, JaMarcus, hey, how's that DVD? Did you look at it? What did it look? He's like, oh, coach, all the plays. I'm good. Whatever you want to run, let's do it. I like him. He said, okay, which ones you like? 5 of them? Do you like 6 of them, 10 of them? How much you like? Coach, whatever. I saw them, that we good. We ready to go. I can do them all. And Coach DiFilippo was kind of looking around and was like, it was a blank DVD. So he didn't watch the DVD, but he told everybody, oh, y'all watched it. I did. And that's when I think they kind of knew, like, uh-oh, we're in trouble.
He would barely last 3 seasons from a combination of laziness, issues off the field, and an inability to grasp what it took to be an NFL quarterback. He was so bad, he told NFL teams he would play for free, and no one cared. There's no surprise here. He belongs in the dreaded Leaf tier. The differences between the 2007 and 2008 #1 overall picks was immense, going from a never-before-seen quarterback to an offensive lineman. But unlike the Raiders, the Dolphins' bet actually paid off. Jake Long became a difference maker right away. He would end up going to 4 straight Pro Bowls, but like many others, he would play through injuries, and it would eventually cost him big time. His body began to fall apart. Eventually, he had to call it quits at the age of 31, never returning to that Pro Bowl level of play that he had achieved early in his career. He was elite, but because it was short-lived, he belongs in the pretty good tier.
The Detroit Lions select Matthew Stafford, quarterback, Georgia.
Matt Stafford has been a consistent stat sheet stuffer. In year 3, he put up MVP-like numbers, throwing for over 5,000 yards and 41 touchdowns. That's more than any other quarterback on this list. Although he hasn't had much postseason success, this isn't all to blame on him. He consistently dealt with poor defense and 0 run game. Stafford is only 30 years old, which means that he could still play for another 10 years or so. He's on pace statistically to be one of the best all time. As of right now, he also belongs in the pretty good tier. For the most part, #1 picks end up being pretty solid, with the occasional player who is riddled with injuries or just isn't very good. Then there's this guy.
These next 2 games, 2 of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the NFL, Brett Favre and then Peyton Manning, and get JaMarcus Russell. I like it.
Russell back. Russell throws middle. Caught. Shillings touchdown.